Hey everyone, today I'm going to review how to avoid moving scams, making sure that you aren't falling for disreputable moving companies. So, for starters, local and national news has reported an increasing rise in moving scams. Now, in 2024, the average loss was around $700. It was around $850 in 2023, and as of this year, 2025, it's down to about $500 per person per scam. Now, that is not the bare minimum that you could lose, or even the bare maximum that you could lose. That is just the average. So I'm going to review 3 of the top scams and what you can do to avoid them. So there are 3 main scams that the BBC and the FTC and the DOT have all noted over the last several years. And there are different factors relating to each. And of course, each of them look very similar to a legitimate moving company, which makes it kind of tricky. But there are some red flags you can look out for so that you avoid getting scammed. So the first one here is a no-show, right? That is where you receive a quote and they ask you to pay a deposit. Now, with that, you might only lose around $500. That is actually where this average from the BBB has been generated, right? The average loss around $500, because what ends up happening is most people get a quote online and the company says, okay, now pay us cash and we will start the service or move you on to the next phase or what have you. And then they do, and then that company never shows up. So some of the easiest ways to avoid this is recognizing that for starters, moving companies will not require any type of deposit or cash upfront before they send someone to your home to give you a legitimate estimate. So I'm going to use this moving calculator right here to just generate this quick 3-bedroom from Kansas to North Carolina move. So when you calculate this and you want to get a quote from a professional moving company like Safeway, you have to actually put in your information, right? Let's say we're moving from Kansas and we're moving to North Carolina. So now Safeway is going to check the availability, and we're moving in March, and boxes, furniture, and more, right? We're moving from a single story, no, multi-story. We have 2 stories here, 3 bedrooms. So I have to go through this. I think I have an average amount of stuff, and I want to move all of it. I want you to move everything. They're going to ask for your email, or they're going to ask you to call them so that they have your phone number. And all that information is going to be used to send you marketing information and get more details about exactly what your move is, you know, the city that you're moving from and to. But they will then send someone to your house. Someone like Safeway, a company I've used, will actually send someone to your house, and that someone is they have different names for them depending on the company, but in effect, they are a sales rep. They are there to physically walk through your house, look at all your stuff, see exactly what you have, see if you have any unique items like a piano. I have a piano. Pianos always come with an additional service fee because they are difficult to move and they typically require unique tools and time. So they're going to send someone to your house, and then that someone is going to tell you exactly what your estimate is now that they've looked at all your stuff and figured out how much it weighs. At no point prior to that moment, when they give you a document to review with your legally binding estimate as soon as you sign it, will they ask for a deposit. So if any company asks for a deposit ahead of time, it's a scam. Feel free to report them. You can see here that you can report them to your state enforcement agency. You can report them to DOT. You can also report them to the FTC, especially if you have already paid them and they are not a reputable company. Let's say you paid that deposit and they didn't show up. Now, the second most common scam is where they send someone, they get your stuff. Maybe they didn't send someone. Maybe they just did an online estimate. And they sent someone, they packed up all your stuff, and then they hold your stuff hostage. All of a sudden, they say, hey, it turns out you have a lot of stuff, and it's going to cost you more than we said. Now, in these situations, it's important to understand that legitimate moving companies send that person to your house for a reason. The average house might only, let's say, have 10,000 pounds worth of goods based on the size of the home and the number of people, but you might have 15,000 because you have a home gym. Well, the moving company needs to know that beforehand so that they can give you a more accurate estimate based on that weight. So if they send someone to your home and then you look over your estimate, it will tell you within 10% what you will expect to pay, and that's it. You won't be required to pay beyond 10% above that legally binding quote. However, disreputable companies, as you might see here in this example, with an 83-year-old woman trying to move from California to Washington, will be told, oh, it's only $6,000. And then suddenly be told, just kidding, we packed up all your stuff and it turns out it's very heavy and it's going to be $26,000. And if you don't give us the $26,000, then we're going to sell all your stuff. So that is called the bait and switch or hostage scam. That one is equally here, it's equally common. The deposit scam representing about 26% of all scams in 2023 and 2024, and that hostage scam representing about 24%. So it's the second most common scam. You can avoid this scam by making sure you don't sign anything that doesn't have all of the information listed on it. When you look at your bill before you sign, it will tell you exactly what each line item is. It will say, this much money for the piano, this much money for the fuel surcharge, this much money for the total weight versus the total cubic feet of your house. So you should be able to get all of that in writing. And you should get it from several movers so that you can compare them to one another, make sure that they all have similar line items and nothing hidden or out of sorts. Now, the reason I use Move Buddha as my example is because this is a company that uses a proprietary vetting process to provide connections through a verified partner network. So when I'm looking for moving cost by state or a moving calculator, moving from Kansas, all the companies here are companies that have been vetted. They are companies that are legitimate. They are companies that have that US DOT number. They have insurance through third parties, and they come in different forms, whether it's full service movers or container or freight, as well as rental trucks. So you can trust that any company you see here is a verified and legitimate company. You can visit their website. Let's say you've never heard of U-Pack. I had never heard of U-Pack before I used them. So I went to their website and I saw what they were all about. I called their number, but more importantly, I looked up information about them. I looked at their Better Business Bureau profile. I looked to make sure that they were an accredited business, that they actually did have headquarters. We went to one of their physical offices to make sure that they were legitimate. So despite having vetted processes here, you can always and should always take it upon yourself to do some sort of vetting yourself, whether that's checking social media, checking the licensing, looking at any other information here. You can see they have the DOT information here for New Jersey, for Arkansas. That's all going to be very important. You can also look up their DOT number if you are not sure. You can just search right here, search by the name. Starts with, ends with, or just contains. Maybe you don't remember, so you just put in pack because you knew the pack was there. Okay, well now there's a lot of companies and you can see where they are located, all the companies that have the word pack in them. So that's one way to avoid, one of many ways to avoid that hostage scenario. And the third most common reported to the Department of Transportation and the BBB is the scam where they have your things and they don't say, oh, your stuff weighs too much now. What they tell you instead is, oh, there's a bunch of hidden fees. So you have a bunch of tiny fees here. So it's going to cost you 3 times what we said. So that's not an uncommon thing in the real world for movers to have specific areas where they talk about services that have extra fees. These are usually called additional fees or extra service fees. When you are moving, those extra service fees might include things like shipping your car. that is something that a company might offer, and it's going to come at an additional cost beyond what is quoted for the move for your household goods. Those service fees might also include things like pianos, long carry. If they have to park the car far away from your driveway and walk with your goods, let's say 100 feet, they might charge you for that because that's a lot of extra time and effort. And of course, safety risk for the employees. If you have stairs, if they have to go up and down an apartment with all your goods, they're going to charge more for that. Fuel surcharge, bulk items, that's applicable to things like motorcycles or gun safes. So any large item you have or any issues that you might have with unique things that require additional tools or labor will likely come at an extra fee. But scam artists will pack up all your goods and then tell you once they have your goods, hey, it's going to cost you more. Pay now or we sell your stuff. Legitimate moving companies will send someone initially to do that walkthrough and go, hey, you have a piano, so that's going to cost extra if you want us to ship it. And then when you look at that bill before you sign it, before you have signed anything that's legally binding, it will have a line item for each of those extra service charges, like assembling or disassembling furniture, shipping your piano, what have you. So there are a lot of things that moving companies do that look similar to the scams, but scams come with their own red flags. The biggest being demanding a deposit up front, holding all your goods and then upping the price significantly, not within that 10% window, or holding all your goods hostage and demanding that you pay for extra service fees. So you can avoid all of these scams by only starting with companies you know have been vetted, like these companies, doing your part to research them through a third-party database, like searching this mover's database here, checking with the BBB, checking with the FTC to see where complaints might have been lodged in the past. Always get things in writing, make sure that it is accurate. Never sign anything that has blank spaces where important information should be, like prices, dates, services rendered. Don't work with anyone that demands that deposit before the move or doesn't have a DOT registration number. And if someone's just giving you a bad vibe, always report them. If you've already paid them, report them to the FTC. If not, report them to the DOT or your state enforcement agency.